Hint, it's not Biden. And it wouldn't be Trump if he was president either. While both sides of the aisle like to use gas prices to villainize each other, the truth is far more complicated, sinister, and out of the president's control than they want you to know. Welcome to the true conspiracy. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beccasphere, where we talk about the climate crisis and clean energy transition. If those sound like interesting and important topics to you, hit the subscribe button below and ring the bell so you don't miss every time I post. Whew, we are going through a heat spell in all of the United States right now. So if you're overheated right now, don't take extremely cold showers, just take cool showers so your body doesn't go into shock. That's my PSA. Okay, so gas prices depend mainly on four factors as expressed by the U.S. Energy Information Agency: marketing costs, distribution, which is why prices can fluctuate between cities, federal and state taxes, which is why California's costs more than Wyoming, and oil prices. Notice that besides the federal tax, which isn't worth very much, the president doesn't really have any control of these factors. Oil prices are what we're going to focus on today because it accounts for well over half of the price of the pump and is what causes the price to fluctuate in a way that people get all up in arms about. Rightfully so, of course. Everything is so expensive right now, it feels like salt in the wound every time filling up the tank costs even more. And the price of oil is so embedded into the cost of everything too. So when it goes up, life just gets more expensive. Literally, oil prices drive inflation. You should feel angry about inflation. You should feel angry about the price at the pump. I'm just encouraging you to put your anger in the right direction, you know? And that direction is towards oil companies, because it doesn't matter if the president leased more drilling sites or provided more subsidies, which the latest presidents have done both of, the prices still stay high. This is purposeful, and you can see it from the record profits fossil fuel companies are still raking in. That brings me to the true conspiracy. Fossil fuel companies are working together to keep gas prices this high. They're basically acting like a unit. You would think that having multiple companies, Exxon, Chevron, Shell, would create competition that would keep prices low. That's like economics 101, right? But that's not what's happening. This behavior is why OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, is called a cartel by many. We usually hear that word in the context of drugs, but let's read the definition again. A group of independent market participants who collude with each other as well as agreeing not to compete with each other in order to improve their profits and dominate the market. Yeah, that's literally what the fossil fuel companies have done to a T. They all meet together to talk strategy. And they've been doing this for a long time, so they're starting to get more brazen. Companies have begun literally merging into one. Last month, the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, approved a $60 million merger deal between ExxonMobil and Pioneer Natural Resources. While it gave the okay for Exxon to buy Pioneer, the FTC barred Pioneer's former CEO, Scott Sheffield, from becoming a board member. Actually, I believe they banned a lot of the board members. In a following report, the FTC said that it found evidence that Scott colluded with OPEC and OPEC Plus to raise crude oil prices so much that it might have cost the average American household an extra $500 a year on fuel per car. That's price fixing. And let's look at how much money these companies have made for their shareholders recently. $300 billion in the last 2 years. Yeah, that's actually criminal. It actually might be. Democrats want the Justice Department to look at whether this violates the Sherman Antitrust Act. In a letter to the DOJ, the congressman expressed concern on how this is impacting our national security. After all, OPEC works with Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran. Despite America being the largest crude oil producer in the world, we are not actually part of OPEC, and we also still import about half of our oil supply. We should be their biggest competition, and for the longest time we were. That's one of the reasons why prices used to be more reasonable. While it felt good for everyday Americans to have those low prices, both OPEC and the American oil companies' shareholders weren't really liking the arrangement because it kept undercutting the prices that lined their pockets. So in 2017, OPEC and the American oil companies met to chat about their common interests. And you can actually see the correlation between them meeting and gas prices starting to go up. But then the pandemic happened and no one was driving, so the prices dropped because there was more supply than there was demand. So when the US economy got back online, fossil fuel companies chose to not up the supply to make up for the increased demand. They also refused to do so when Russia invaded Ukraine. And this is because, allegedly, they had formed a new understanding that it was better to just keep the supply low and rake in profits. Struggling Americans, be damned. Again, all this information is like not from the dark side of the web or anything. It's literally from a combination between the latest FTC report and what oil analysts have been saying for years.
We went off of the evidence, their text messages, their emails. When companies and top executives say that they're trying to collude, we believe them.
That and some fossil fuel heads are outright saying it as well.
We have committed to our long-term shareholders we'll be growing 0 to 5% regardless of the oil price. Obviously, we're going to be sending 80% of our cash flow back in form of dividends to our investors. In addition, we've announced a $4 billion stock buyback. About half the independents, the public independents, are adhering to that 0 to 5%.
Now, of course, the American Petroleum Institute, the biggest lobbying entity of the fossil fuel industry, shrugged this off as the act of one individual and quickly blamed Biden for not giving fossil fuel companies more land as the reason for why prices were so high. That's always their counter. But big oil already has over 23 million acres of land, and they're not drilling on over half of it. So clearly that's not the reason. Also, Scott isn't just some dude. He was one of the biggest players of the American petroleum industry until very recently, having private dinners, text messages, and emails with OPEC nations and the Texas oil regulator. These companies just want to keep making record profits and then buying each other up with that money. Now we're starting to see in the news that ConocoPhillips wants to buy Marathon Oil for $17.1 billion. Which brings me back to the previous video where Trump allegedly promised big oil that it would get FTC off their backs if he got back in the office. He's totally fine with companies pricing Americans out of existence. Because a lot of Americans don't realize that fossil fuel companies are the ones behind it, and so then they give in to this idea of drill baby drill because, again, Economics 101 would suggest that the reason why prices are so high is because there's not enough supply. But that's not what's happening here.
I will stop Biden's wasteful spending and rapidly terminate the Green New Scam, which is a total scam. We're spending money like drunken sailors. You know the expression, drunken sailors? They love that expression. I will end the Biden inflation nightmare, and we will end it quickly. And I will repeal crooked Joe Biden's insane electric vehicle mandate, and we will drill, baby, drill. We will drill, baby, drill. Right?
Doing this would just further the reliance on these CEOs who are just trying to make shareholder profit. So what now? It's probably unsurprising to hear from this channel, but we need to reduce oil companies' power by moving away from fossil fuels as the main source of energy supply. Fossil fuel companies are clearly not interested in being part of the clean energy transition in any meaningful capacity, as they keep dropping their decarbonization and clean energy ambitions every few years, just quietly, seeing if y'all don't notice. I noticed. So we need to encourage a new combination of energy companies and publicly owned entities to take over this new chapter, while making sure that the new companies won't be able to reach this level of power again. We need to learn from our mistakes. Clean energy already produces more domestic jobs than fossil fuel companies and revitalizes energy towns that have been left behind by the fossil fuel industry. And now we're encouraging more manufacturing to be produced in the United States with the recent tariffs on China and the Inflation Reduction Act encouraging more domestic manufacturing. So clean energy is actually the best way that the US can move forward in its energy independence idea, which I'm not against. I'm just saying fossil fuels is not the way to go. Here we are as the biggest producer of oil, and yet we still require half of our oil supply to come from other countries. So that method ain't working. And the price of clean energy rivals the price of gas despite having way less subsidies. So it seems like the obvious direction to strengthen our national security and lower energy prices now is to encourage the clean energy transition. What do you think of the FTC report and my thoughts on the clean energy transition? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. It's now time for a fun fact about Rue. Rue likes to sleep with the grandparents. He sleeps with them probably about half the night, and then he sometimes sleeps with me. Though I'm trying not to get salty with the fact that he sleeps with the grandparents more. It's fine. It's good that he loves them, right, Rue? You still love me, right? I'm still mom, right? He won't look at me. It's fine. I'm not salty. But he likes to sleep like right in the middle of the bed and make everybody contort around him, despite him only being 10 pounds. He can really stretch out. And that was a fun fact about Rue. Okay, now you can go. Until next time, remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to support your local news and environmental organizations. Thank you to the people on Patreon who help support me and my fur baby Rue. A special shout out to the climate confident and courageous David H., Paul B., Phil Plasma, Dan Morton, Specker, Bree C., Deanne, Kevin Morton, SKP Joe's Course Gold, and Gary Stark. I greatly appreciate your support of $5 or more. If you would like to support the work I do, please check out the Patreon and buy me a coffee, links in the description below for reoccurring or one-time payments. Bye for now.